And here we are. So 2 minutes early. So I'm just going to prepare remarks and stuff. All right.
Looking very smart, I might say.
Oh, thank you. I was trying to find an image that's supposed to be shown at the end of my presentation. I realized I don't have it.
Oh.
Thankfully, I texted it to Jacob. Get out of the text there. So, how are you?
I'm fine. Well, I actually got a stinking cold. First one about 2 years by dint of not going out much. But anyway, small beer. No, busy doing Christmas cards mainly.
Comes in the
I
worst
keep saying
way.
every year, I'm going to stop this. But I somehow, the urge to swim upstream is still there.
Indeed. Yeah, exactly. So today, the way I plan to do it is to, the first 5 minutes, hello, blah, blah, blah. Then I'll do a 15-minute presentation, hopefully not a minute more. And then we'll open it up for discussion on the Doug topic of how can we do stuff here.
Hey.
And we have Regan Bloom here again. You have
morning.
Your Tulum name. Hi, Deanie.
Good morning, Deanie.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, let me change that.
So, Deanie, you're in London next week, are you?
I'm not going to that conference.
All right.
Yeah.
I must say, I realised that short of getting an air flight from Southampton to London, I wasn't going to get there.
Yeah. No, I'm going to go to London. I'm going to Mix this summer in July. I'll be back in July.
Oh, cool. Well, definitely we should. I'll let me know. Get to
I would like to. I'd like to come and visit you folks.
Yeah, you have to. Both Southampton and London.
Yes.
So, yeah, we're filling up a bit. Hi, everyone. I was just saying before you came on that we'll spend the next 4 minutes to kind of say hello and whatnot and see who comes in. And then I have a presentation. It's about 15 minutes, which is longer than I've ever done. But I decided for this book, it kind of had to be done. I've been editing it down all week. And then we open up for discussion. So that's fair enough, right? So Richard Snyder, where are you?
I'm in Vancouver, Washington, same as Deanie. So just across the river from Portland, Oregon.
I was going to introduce you to him, Froda. He's my he's associate director of my lab, my collaborator on that article. He's a metadata specialist for the Next in the lab. So teaches in my program.
Fantastic.
It was great.
Yeah, sorry.
No, not at all. It was great getting to work on this. So thanks for the opportunity.
Deanie is a bit amazing. Right, I'm just going to check on the Twitters. Oh no, I can't actually. I kicked myself out of that group. Mark, are you still in our Twitter group?
Yes, vaguely. I have to go and look at it online because I normally read it through a client. I'll get you.
Oh, Fabienne is there. That was kind of my main issue. Brandel sometimes gets delayed on these days because of family matters, which is obviously fair enough. But yeah, no, it's good. It's exciting. So, but you all know the book is not actually coming out today. You'll have a copy, but we're going to take the transcript of today's conversation into it. So it'll be released next Friday. I have a burning desire to try to record as much VR related thinking as I possibly can before the end of the year. So yeah. This is something to, I'm just going to use this minute to tell the family.
So this means where you're sitting now is where you're sitting on the recording. So wave for posterity.
So Mark, I would love to talk to you about the Literary Machines project.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'd love to. I feel terrible. You know, I did so much work, God, but 2017, it's still sort of sitting around. And Ted's not getting any younger.
Well, I'm teaching a course in hypertext starting January 9th. So let's talk before then, because I'd love to be one of my speakers if you don't mind.
And so by the wonder of Twitter filters, there was someone in Malawi who was saying they were just about to throw out a copy of floppy-based copy of Guide, to which my answer was, no, please don't. So I've linked in Klaus, and I think it's going to get posted over because we could do something with that.
Yeah.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, things disappearing into the ether is becoming more and more of a stressful situation, which is something we've discussed often. And now that we're moving into an even more data necessary to store and present environment, VR, it's going to be even more difficult to store what we do. We'll have to make some decisions. Right, okay, I think that I'll just have to start with my little remarks before anyone else comes in. First of all, obviously, I'm going to ask you all to mute your mics. I can hear somebody doing something now. And when it comes to questions, anybody have any questions now before we get into this stuff? If you have any questions during what I'm saying, if it is something like you cannot hear me or it doesn't make any sense what I'm saying, please just speak, because I can't see your faces, obviously. But other than that, if you just write your questions down, chat or otherwise, then we'll go through it afterwards. Because all I'm trying to do over the next 15 minutes is to be provoking you guys.
Are you putting yourself on the main viewing so we can have that? Are you going to record yourself with the Hollywood squares, or are you going to focus on your own image talking?
I actually don't know. I just normally do the record whatever it is. But if I go speaker view now, what do you get?
Go speaker view. It's better for the recording if you do that.
But how about for you? You see everything fine now?
I'm not seeing you in speaker view myself, but you should.
I'm not sure. Normally, I just do that for myself. How do I do that for you guys? Anyone want to give me the magic touch?
I went ahead and put you on my own speaker view, but as long as you're doing it for yourself, that's important.
Yeah.
I think you may be able to pin it. If you pin yourself, perhaps.
That sounds painful, but I'll try. Just for pin myself. Spotlight for everyone. Okay, that's me. Aha. All right. How's that? Is that good?
Yes.
All right. So it's 7 past. Going to read a little bit of text and do some very brief demo that is pre-recorded, so you don't have to worry about that taking forever. So welcome to the Future of Text for Volume 3 launch. Doug Engelbart asked a question at the start of a demo which would come to change the world. He simply asked, what if in your office, you as an intellectual worker, were supplied with a computer display, backed up by a computer, which was alive for you all day, instantly responsive to every action you have? How much value could you derive from that? We spent the last 54 years asking questions about the responsive computer could give us. It's fair to say that computers have increased by orders of magnitude in performance since then, but they have still not managed to live up to what Doug's imagination saw possible. We must keep asking, but with Volume 3 of the Future of Text, we've been focusing not on the computer, but on the computer display. As I write some of these words on my headset at MetaQuest Pro, a few days before the launch day, I'm in, let's be honest, crudely presented coffee shop, and I'm typing on the physical keyboard of my Apple MacBook Pro. I can see my hands in pass-through video, but the pass-through is not clear enough to allow me to see the keys. It's all quite rough. This is why I don't use pass-through video in general. It's simply too noisy with too much jitter. But never mind, it will get better. I'm writing in my word processor Author, which I've named in honor of Doug and his augmentation philosophy. Author and augment have the same etymological roots. I double tap on my headset for a full pass-through for a moment to see my coffee cup on the table, and I take a sip. I still have access to the normal world, but with another double tap, I'm back in the virtual coffee shop. There are many niggles with the way I can work in a headset now, such as the time and hassle it is to connect my laptop to the virtual environment, the inflexible ways monitors are handled, and so on. But let's just assume this will be improved in the future to be transparently simple. What is clear already is how clear the work environment already is. Sure, the text I'm reading is not as sharp as on the Retina display on my laptop, but it's also not bad at all. I have the benefit of a large display, which goes beyond what a large physical display can do, such as being a third the way down into the table that I'm typing on. I do not have to think about physical space to think about what is comfortable to write on. All I'm doing, however, currently is living in a traditional digital environment with a larger screen. While I find the tech impressive, the gaming immersive and social experiences convincing, I've not had much experience with knowledge work in the headsets, since there's not much software available beyond the virtual displays. At this point, it's worth pointing out that I think the terms VR, AR, and even XR will not enter mainstream. I think people will refer to this as working in a headset, or maybe through a specific brand name. We'll see soon enough. Going into VR is somewhat back to the future, as Fabian mentioned at the symposium. We used to work at room scale, with papers all over our desks and with whiteboards and so on. Then, as our work became more digital, we started doing more and more in rectangles measured in inches, from the largest 27-inch display to 13-inch laptop screens and 5-inch smartphone screens. We are now reclaiming space, but this time, space is not limited by physical constraints. It will only be limited by our imagination. We can soon put posters up on walls without the delay and cost of printing, or indeed buying and placing monitors. We can soon open our digital books, and I say books in quotes, even though they may look like facsimiles of digital PDF type documents or printed documents, and let them fly. Someone said that during the 68 demo, it looked like Doug was flying through cyberspace with both hands at the controls, with his mouse and his corded keyset. This is not a bad metaphor for how we will live and work in the headsets. Soon we will really fly through our information with both hands at the control, really using our hands with the finesse of how we move our hands, having much more impact on the stuff of knowledge as they would on a physical clay model. Doug invented the mouse and the corded keyset, but his sights were set much higher to a control system we're getting close to being able to implement soon. Soon we'll be able to open a book like our own Future of Text, maybe volume 4, and all the images of the book will populate spaces in our real world. On AR augmented walls, murals can expand into entire walls. Embedded timelines will appear as we want them to, as Tron-style neon tubes or paper cutouts of historical moments, whatever we want. Maps will be rendered on the table in 3D or at 1:1 scale for close inspection, soon. Soon we'll be reading academic documents, where citations will, Ted Nelson style, leap out of books to their sources, which will be accessible for us at the turn of a hand at the flick of a wrist. Libraries will be presented and represented any way we want. If you want to enter the Library of Congress or the National Library of France, we can step right in. Would it be better for you if the books were organized in a different way? No problem. Would you like to see the books arranged by which one cites which? Maybe you'd like to see the people behind the books and how they relate? That can be done. Soon books will be but one way of binding information together in a coherent and robust form. And information will become truly liquid, as will our interactions, soon. This and much more can only be done if the infrastructures are there. By this, I primarily mean the metadata to describe what everything is and how it connects. Otherwise, we'll be working with what might as well just be JPEGs, pretty but inert, uninteractive. In the Future Text Lab and for my PhD, we've been working on making the metadata elevated to the same level as the data. After all, metadata is just data which says what the other data is, something Ted Nelson made me realize. Metadata may sound boring, may sound techie, but let me repeat, metadata is the data which described what data is. That makes it gold dust. In academia, If you publish only plain text, you're only publishing the tip of the iceberg of your knowledge work. Why hide the possibilities of making yourself more deeply understood? Why strip away the semantic formatting of your paper? Why make citation hard to follow? And why make your work hard to cite? I'd like to show you what metadata makes possible by interacting with our book as a simple PDF. I'm going to show you a little video of this in a second. This is our book, full published PDF. However, it features a visual meta appendix. Visual meta was the result of my PhD thesis, and it simply states what the document is at the back of the document. It's written in a very simple format using the academic standard BibTeX style. The result is that in over 700 pages book, we can navigate much quicker and much more conveniently than through page by page or typing in a page number, because we built the PDF viewer we call Reader. Share screen. You can see the screen?
Yep.
When we go through a page, it can be a little cumbersome to go page by page. So what we've made possible is use the down arrow key to go skip between articles. So you can really jump around the document. You can fold the document to get an overview. You can keep making it showing more or less information. Click wherever you want to go. If you highlight text when you're reading, and you then fold the document, you will see the highlighted text in the folded outline. If you select text and do Command F to see all occurrences of that text, it redraws the screen like this with a bit of gray above and below for context. If the text has a glossary term, it'll be at the top of the screen. The glossary term has other glossary terms that'll be in bold, and you can click on them. To cite the document, select what you want to cite, copy it, and then you can go to author, and you will paste it as a full citation, ready for export in the future. But also, if you go to something like mail, paste that there. When that's sent, it has a link, it has the citation information plus a link to search Google. This document is not public yet, so it won't be found, but it's just another way of trying to help with the addressing issue. I know I'm still sharing screen. Stopping sharing. Here we go. To be clear, all this is possible because of the easy to read and easy to parse metadata conveniently placed at the back of the book. Fabian has taken this book much further into VR, which is not only got beautiful readably pages, but also with computational text. The system is called, and Fabian, you'll have to pronounce it later properly when you show it, SPA-SCA, spatial scaffolding. He will make a brief demo after these remarks. I firmly believe that the future of text has the potential to truly augment how we think and communicate. I firmly believe that we must use what we have now to work to solve problems we have now. We cannot wait for some hypothetical neural implant to have discussions of how the future will all about video or voice or whatever it might be. Today we're celebrating the future of text, so I don't think I have to spend too much time selling the potential of text. And I hope that we're collectively waking up to the potential of text freed from the constraints of the frame of the page. Today, I invite you all to join us in wondering what a future working, particularly with text, in these headsets, what it can be like if we dream. Doug said that dreaming is hard, and he was not kidding. Without experiments and experience, our dreams stay vague and undefined. We must dream. We simply cannot afford to let this one single opportunity of being the only people in history who are alive and hopefully present at the start of this visually immersive world. This is a truly momentous moment in history. This is the last time in history of humanity where we will not have headsets as a regular part of our work tools. We cannot afford to simply accept functionality which giant computer companies will give us. Their focus is to augment their bottom line. Our focus is to augment our highest potential. To dream productively, we need to think, discuss, build experiments, experience them, discuss, and build again. In other words, we need to build something which will help us build something more useful tomorrow. We need to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, as Doug would often say. And once the giant companies have given us their modes of interaction, it will be hard to invent something else with the reality of that being present. Do we have the will to do this? Can we really dream ourselves a better future? If there's a will, there is a way, we like to say. However, on the issue of free will, Arthur Schopenhauer wrote in the early 1800s in a Norwegian magazine of all things, that man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. In other words, we may want something, but do we have control of the internal and external forces which sets the scene for what we want? If we are to leverage our creativity, curiosity, and common focus, we need to look not only at the technical infrastructure we'll need to shape, but also the social and psychological infrastructures which will help us dream better. In a world of climate change, serious income inequality, a major war in Europe, stubborn pandemic, and a cost of living crisis, it is clear that we need to look at improving how we think and communicate. But as a species, we seem to lack the imagination and drive to do this. In addition to working to improve the world with specific areas, we need to focus on what we think with and what we communicate with. And I would say that part of that is text. We will need to foster an appreciation for what text can do for us and help people see that even though text was invented and developed eons ago, we still draw great benefit from its compactness, flexibility, robustness, and ability to extend and connect our minds. The potential of digital text is largely untapped. The potential of digital text in VR is hardly even appreciated as being a thing. We now have a chance to demonstrate to people that text unleashed can be something magical, something deeply powerful to help us think, not to remove thinking from us like AI will partly do. That's another issue, another symposium, another book. If we can collectively raise awareness of the power of richly interactive text through the emergence of VR, which the public currently has both excitement and cynicism about, but at least there is a strong public awareness that it might be the next thing, then we can use this power to shift more people, more companies to developing, and the will and interest to work to augment what text is. Doug did the first heavy lifting with his Augmentation Research Center and changed the world. We're trying to do this in a modest way in the Future Text Lab, and next year I hope we'll be able to take it up a notch. In closing, something a little more concrete. My wishes for the future of text and headsets is simple as far as I'm concerned. In the near term, I can expect reasonably to put on a headset and work with virtual screens instantly available. In the longer term, I want to have rich metadata enabling interactions I can only barely imagine today. I need to do a screen share for the last bit. This image, top right here, I think you're covering it, excuse me, is of our book's defined concepts and the map view in Author, the same data which is exported as a glossary, as you saw earlier. By the end of 2023, I dream to see this information in multi-wall AR/VR experience where the third dimension really provides a benefit. Maybe there will be author names and columns or two against the wall, citations on another, locations on a globe, and so on. And the book, again in quotes, itself, the object of these concepts revolve around, represented as a magical facsimile of the printed book to explode into explorations at will. Just want to zoom in a little bit on this, because this is a complete and utter mess. So my final words, so you don't read them, I go back out. I thank you, so many of you, for having contributed to the book and dialogue over the year, and I thank you all for being here today. I would particularly like to thank my co-curators, Vint Cerf, Ismail Sergeldin, Mark Anderson, Dini Grigar, and Klaus Atzenbeck. Thank you for your patience in listening to this. I look forward to our discussions today and in the future. A discussion which will be recorded and included as a transcript in the book. The actual publication will be Friday week. Today the book is final, but this edition will be added next week before the book is made publicly available. So I ask you, what if in your office, you as an intellectual worker were supplied with a fully immersive computer display, backed up by a supercomputer? What would you like this to be? Answers, please.
Thank you, Frode. I have a couple of wonderful presentation and some highlights I thought for us to think about from that is the notion of highest potential. I thought that was a good point to bring up. Like, what can we do to be the best we can be in terms of humanity? when you showed that image, as I was thinking about that, you showed that final image, and I was thinking of Tom Phillips's Humament. So you called that messy, but actually that looked like what Humament was trying to get to with the overlay of text. So some of you aren't familiar with that. It's Tom Phillips's famous work. And then finally, the idea of living in a headset. None of us are, just few of us are wearing a headset right now in this environment. But I'm thinking about the kinds of social experiences that will come out of that, and one of which could be a complete focus on an immersion into something, right? Which is the opposite of what people are saying computers do to us now. There's, the idea that we're scattered, we're not thinking in a focused way. Headsets will help focus that. I also think if we're going to do that, it needs to be multi-use, so that we don't become isolated from each other. So if we're in a headset experiencing something, we need to be with other people wearing headsets experiencing something, so that we don't isolate our communities and disconnect from other people. Once again, getting back to our highest potential, because part of being human is being social, right? But thank you for those comments. Those are just some responses.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dini. I see David has his hand up, but just in getting back to that, I agree with the and. Sometimes we do need to get away from other people. So I've been talking to someone this week about reading, and sometimes you just need a private reading space to get away, and VR can be beautiful for that too. So one of the key things I found with battling within our Future Text Lab over the year, it has been really passionate, has been that at some point we'll be floating like angels, so to speak. But before then, we will still have rectangles and things. But even just dealing with the rectangles and things, where we do it and how we do it is a really big deal. And to have something like an actual book club, be really mundane in a VR environment where you read, but you have people of a similar persuasion reading the similar thing might be good. So how we go in there, absolutely important. But also, it can be so immersive, and we're there all by ourselves in our flow, in our labs, that you really take the headset off and you really appreciate being in the regular world again. So it's going to be interesting to see all the different directions this might go. David?
In answer to your question, I would like to be able to look in any direction at anything, whether I have a headset on, or I'm using a phone, or I'm looking online on a computer screen, which may be antiquated in a while. I want to be able to see everything related to that particular thing that anyone ever thought was related to it, that was verified to be related to it. And not just pieces of text or pieces of videos, but also upcoming meetings and book clubs and conversations and ask me anythings that are related to the thing that I'm looking at. And I want to also be able to generate using AI based on the thing, where that thing that I'm looking at is the context for whatever I want to generate. And I should be also able to pull the best from that and share that with that object, so that when other people come by, they can actually see that and respond to it. Or I don't even have to use AI. I should be able to attach a conversation to that object, or a poll or a survey. And I really love the notion of being able to expand the information into the environment. And so if I did expand the information into the environment, I should then be able to also to layer metadata on top of the mural on the wall that I just put there. So yeah, I think it could be pretty exciting, and I want to be able to read from it completely and have him there and be able to be myself as a human when I want to as well. So it should be easily in and out, and easily deactivate upon needed, or activated.
Yeah, it's nice to hear those comments and wishes. And all I would like to say is two things to that, and it's pretty obvious, but needs to be said. Number one, for that to happen, you need to have the metadata. Vint Cerf has been kind of egging us along for a while, saying, okay, VR, but there's still so many problems to be filled in the normal flat screen world. And a lot of it comes down to metadata. I mean, when I started working with Mark Anderson doing our PhDs at Southampton, I thought I could do amazing visualizations coming from an arts background of citations and stuff, till I found out the data wasn't there. So the dreams you have, I agree, I applaud you. But just what I'm really wary of is that we start thinking like CD-ROM information ghettos, as I disparagingly call it, where everything works great as a demo, but the input-output just isn't there. So I'm very glad you highlighted that. And secondly, we've got experience. In the book, just this last week, I added a section of really simple experiments that even I did, because Mozilla lets it be possible. They're the least fancy things in the world, but you can actually feel what it is to have the thing there or the thing there. So hopefully over the next year, we can do more experiences, because one thing that really surprised me was, yes, we want to be able to have connective lines in 3D, but doing even one line in a room that felt like a real room, it was like a washing line. It was really annoying. That was a shock. And that's the kind of interesting thing we have to decide how to literally live with. Peter, you dressed up too, my man. I should have let you speak first.
Thank you, Frode. I think Doug would really want us to focus on fine-grained addressability. Being able to bookmark what it is that I'm seeing in the virtual space, what you're seeing in the virtual space, be able to compute what's visible to both of us at a given moment, so that I could see the ISOVIST representation of what elements in this 3D world Brendel, you and I are looking at, and maybe see, in addition to that, a request for what is it that Mark's looking at that we're not looking at. So the ability to capture my viewpoint versus your viewpoint and preserve that, and also the state of the world as it's being filtered by each of the participants. You might decide that you're not interested in seeing any representations of data sources after 1970. So you could be seeing the exact same library setup that we are, only for you it would be less populated with materials because you're only focused on those after a certain point of time. So we need to have a really rich view spec specification language.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my messages here are stuck. I can only type to Fabian for some reason, but yeah, if you cannot address it, you can't address it. Addressability is just key. Randall.
First of all, thank you for pulling your focus into augmented and virtual reality and the way in which these mediations can impact what it is that reading is. I think it's a really important and pressing subject for us to be able to think about how these whiz-bang technologies, as Meta and other companies are releasing, can be put to use for what many would consider to be the most mundane applications of technology. But my belief is that the reason why we think of them as mundane is because they are the most fundamental. They're the foundation upon which all other computing, all other information processing occurs. And so that's why it's vital. And that's also why ultimately I think it's going to be absolutely the most structurally important and pivotal sort of development for human-computer interaction and human perception and cognition. Once we have these rich environments, the thing that I want, and I think this ties in nicely to what Doug would have wanted, is to be able to establish, like we have today, a dialogue, a back and forth process where we have the ability to manipulate and construct, elevate, and alter the sort of representations of the information as we have it. I think that that's going to be achieved. So I have an Oculus Quest here, just the version 1. These have hand inputs. It wasn't built as the sort of part of the initial design, but something that I discovered later on. And I've always thought that hands being so richly multidimensional, 27 degrees of freedom each, have the opportunity to let us change things with such incredible nuance and specificity that if we can come up with basically a visual expressive language for both the symbolic manipulation in terms of the way those symbols appear to us, as well as that manual manipulation in terms of what we actually do with our hands in order to do that, that we will have an absolutely transformative environment in which we can do what we would then understand as reading and what we would then understand as writing. A lot of people have become enamored of things like ChatGPT and other artificial intelligence systems to do the reading for us or do the writing for us at this point. I would sooner see us do all of that reading and writing ourselves, but reimagine what it is that reading and writing is, based on the benefits of the best that computing can offer us and the best way that we can express ourselves and also view and interpret the expressions of others. So that's a lot, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you.
Yeah, and of course, as most of you know, Brandl is the reason, excuse, whatever you might call it. We've been doing VR all year. Richard, I look forward to hearing what you have to say about this. I can see in the chat here, and again, my chat isn't working. It's only sending to Fabian. After we've done with this topic, it would be really, really great if we go over to Fabian, who will do a walkthrough demonstration of us. But this is the scene description and metadata is just so crucial. So Richard, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just kind of following up on a couple of things from what Brandl said. I think it's interesting to imagine harnessing the multimodality of the space, the inherent multimodality of the space, to a point where we're perhaps using hands to organize text that we're speaking into existence, to the point where we are we're speaking, and there's some sort of capture of what we're saying, and we're moving those things around in real time as we're speaking them and organizing our thoughts. But I just keep coming back to the idea of organization. I would want, I'm sure you're all aware of the community surrounding Obsidian and similar softwares that are using Markdown to organize thoughts, and there's always this rhetoric of attempting to map the human brain into text using a highly customizable, highly personalizable interface of text organization and metadata. And I think I would want something that looks outside of that rectangle for an organizational structure. I think that's a first place to look for how VR could benefit the future of text. And even going back to ChatGPT, I think keeping the thoughts ours, but allowing some similar software and machine learning to help us organize our thoughts, or to do that in real time, could be a really interesting collaboration with the machine. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if we go further back than Doug, what have we got? Man-computer symbiosis, right? Okay, Fabian, are you ready for us? Also looking at Matthias's link here.
Yeah, this just came to my mind. Frode, you just mentioned a VR experiment showing the links between two text pieces. This was actually a workshop done a couple of years ago, totally different topic, but nonetheless, so we were a group and had our findings spread out on the floor, and someone came up with the idea, let's do the visual connections of what we are talking about. So this is real life, and you got the idea, and imagine what we've done there in VR in the near future. So mock-up is one of the key things, and play around and see what's feasible and what's overwhelming us. I'm not really a fan of what was it Dave just said, show me everything related in the VR space of the future. Yes, it should be visible, but don't push it at me. It will be overwhelming to see all the information at once. So there must be a clever algorithm. I don't really bet on artificial intelligence, but there must be a clever augmenting algorithm that decides what might be of interest for me and I should still feel in control what's going on. Hopefully I am in control, but give me more, dive into this direction. It's more like scuba diving than showing everything at once and being on an LSD trip. So much for my first statement over here. Thanks for having me. I'm Matthias, calling from Hamburg in Germany.
It's really good to see you, Matthias. Yeah, that's such an important point. I just wanted to show you here. This is our book in the map view and author. It's all over the place. It's a real mess. But this is how I can see a relationship. So I type, let's say I selected Scott Redberg. Of course, there's a line going to Norway in electronic literature. That's because...
Open your screen if you're sharing.
Oh, thanks for that. I thought I pressed the button. Clearly I missed. Yeah, when I was looking at this and talking about that, you can see my screen now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if I click on it, it's a real mess, which is kind of interesting. You see, I made the screen a little wider than the visible screen, but let's say I select Scott Redberg. He has a line going to electronic literature in Norway, because if I do Command D to see the definition, he is a person. That's why it's rendered italic, and he has that text, as you can see in there. But along the lines of what you're talking about, not showing everything, you're absolutely right. That will be crucial. So the experiment we're doing now, in addition to these fun things, which instantly become messy, is to be able to hide things. I want to, in the same way that I can, hang on. This is obviously a beta version. Okay, so I hide everybody there, and that's all nice. For some reason, Christopher's still there. But if I now show all, or when that's hidden, wouldn't it be interesting if these connections could go into this one? And if there was a connection actually to, let's say, Scott again, he would actually appear when it goes through there. So we have this kind of a concept of like a wormhole. Does that make sense? Because going through, showing different sets is one thing, but being able to somehow encapsulate and expand would be interesting. Of course, in VR, we have more opportunity, but just because we have more opportunity doesn't mean we should use it. It could be a waste. We should still be circumspect about our space. Matthias, I see you have a comment on this. Your hand is up. No, okay. David, do you have anything on this? And Mark, and then we jump over to Fabian.
Well, I just want to respond. Obviously, we wouldn't show everything at once. What I was just saying is that information needs to be available. I believe that in the future, we will have what I'm calling right now a smart filter. It will be adaptive, meaning that it tracks what you're doing and adjusts. It will be tunable, meaning that you can manually tune it. It'll be transparent, so you can actually see what you're not seeing. If you want to see what's being tuned out, it'll be portable, meaning you can take it to other places. And I'm also seeing the possibility of people being able to get paid for classifying information objects, basically creating metadata, and that metadata can feed into the filters so that I could actually say, well, I don't want to see highly obscene language or violence or whatever, and I can basically tune all these things. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that I didn't think that a million things associated with my coffee pot should be all seen at once, and it should be completely controllable.
I'm going to give it to Mark and then Carl, and we're going to go Fabian. But the funny thing with VR, David, is that we agreed with everything you said, obviously. However, in a VR environment, it can be so much more data rich. That's one of the surprises. So if you encode the data intelligently, you can literally have 1 million times more than on a screen. So even though we agreed on both sides of what you said, the new opportunity is fascinating. Mark, Carl, and then Fabian.
Well, I was going to say I'll circle around because I'll what I'm going to say could apply. Come back later after Fabian's gone. So before we all keep pushing him below the fold, I'll take my hand down and I'll come back later.
Yeah, Carl.
So yeah, I kind of have three things for my vision. There's several, I've dedicated about half my career to supporting people with disabilities. So I see the greatest technical challenge of the next decade is, can people with disabilities engage in this virtual world, or are they going to be excluded? So in fact, it's great. I work for the federal government, and we actually have diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And every agency had to submit an equity action plan and things. So we've got some tremendous thing there. This second thing then in that, could a disabled person be able to control a fully able avatar? Can they be participating, and people don't have to know they have a disability? And then the third part is, the third part then is, was sparked when I was reading Thinking Fast and Slow, and can we have interfaces that encourage slow thinking, reflection, and retrospection from an imagined future reality, what could be called a Kahnemannian system to user interface. That's not my dissertation. Somebody else could do that.
Yeah, this is just dog food for me. Just really briefly, slower discussions. That's why I'm very document focused. You write a document, share it, comes back. It's not super fast. I think that is one of the ways to deal with that. When it comes to disabilities, it's really great the work that you're doing. I think it's also going to be interesting, the discussion and learning over a while, to find out how different attributes of a human are negatives and positives in these different environments. And also, what kind of normality are we going towards? One of the things with Horizon Workroom, where you sit there, this is Meta's big flagship thing, very good avatars and all of that stuff. A lot of people, especially people with autism, do not want to be seen. It's intrusive. They want to sit there, maybe tap their fingers. There are lots of things they want to do. And when they're on a Zoom call or just audio, they can relax a little bit. So the question of what do we actually want to make possible is interesting in itself. So it's really, really good to have you part of the conversation, Carl. Fabienne, live from Europe, 10 points.
Don't give the points yet. So let's see if that still works. Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen. I might share the headset, but I remember that so far that's been very low frame rate for everyone watching. So I'm still going to try. You're going to tell me. But otherwise, I'll just start with, I'll do one, let's say, moving of text for people who haven't seen it, just to see what it looks like, even if it's slow, bear with me. And then otherwise, I'm going to switch to the desktop. So going to be a bit smoother experience.
Fabian, when you share, if you do the optimized video, that might help with the frame rate.
So yes.
Screen, at the bottom, there's a little button you can click that says optimize for video and for sound. Click those two, and that might help with the frame rate.
I don't see that option. I'm on the web, so maybe it's something native. So yeah, I don't see that. I think yes, it's also I have a 4K screen, and maybe it's trying to send everything. I can try to lower the resolution of the screen itself, but then it's going to mess everything for me. Give me a bit then.
I have to say, I think this is one of the best bits, because what's being really demonstrated right now is how this new environment doesn't really fit this old environment. The incredible rock solidness of a VR environment. When you have your head in there, your head moves so much. That's why it looks horrible. I just absolutely love that. In the future, when these things are sorted out, we're going to see this as like a fine artifact of our current technology.
So I reduced the screen to the point that I cannot click the accept button. So that's nice. Display. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, beautifully.
Yes.
Can you see the VR viewpoint and my hand moving?
We see a one-up headset view.
Yeah.
Adjusted height by infinity. That should be the title of your biography, by the way.
Do you see the rock behind it?
Yes.
Okay. Is it fluid or not more than usual, or
much better than usual?
It's a little better.
Much better.
Okay, better than usual.
Yeah.
Let's try. So it's the same environment as usual, but I changed the background because it's still not generated. It should be generated from text. So I have my little instruction that I can grab around with my hands. And some of those instructions are code. So when they start with those GXR prefix, it's JavaScript, and there are some shortcuts. So for example, load page range, it's dedicated to the pages of a book. So if I pinch with my left hand at the beginning of it, then I'm going to load the first 13 pages of the Future of Textbooks, which happen to be the table of content. Those pages are a little bit too far for me, but I'll try to grab some.
Fabienne, can I please just interject something here? Yeah. I just want to highlight to everyone what you just did. By the way, if you have your mic on, please mute everyone. I think it may be Fabienne who's doing feedback because of the two systems. But anyway, it just took a piece of code snippet floating in space, activated it to load what he wanted to do. It's just amazing. Okay, I'll try to shut up. It's just so exciting.
It's good. That's the key part, really, because I have a bunch of functions there, like loading the pages of the book. Each page of the book also loads some text, and that text also is code, and that code is load the next page of the book. So you can start exploring the whole book like this. Grab the pages, move them around. You can type with those numbers the page number, and then start to load the next page. And you have those little images on the back, which are the different features, some of them with the text, and behind it the code so that you can activate those features. But again, the point is not really those features, or just examples, the different functions. The point is, if you type with those letters there, or if you have your Bluetooth keyboard, then you can interact with your environment as text, either just annotating. So for example, typing text on top of one of those pages, or with code in order to modify either the environment, so what's around you, or the content of the page, how you want to load the book. There was a discussion before about Obsidian. This one is not, but I'll show you on my desktop. It's the same principle. So that's on the web. So I can give you the link after. But if I load with this new resolution, wow, this is tricky. This function get pages from WebDAV is the same. It's again the pages of the book, but they're loaded from a WebDAV directory. So meaning that you can, instead of having a list of images, you have a directory. If you put PDF or liquid file or JSON, and they can also point toward this, you can load the content this way. You don't need like an API or something like this. So it's, you can imagine directory or a set of files, but available through the web. And eventually write back. So whatever you wrote, how you organize the pages of the book can be written back to that directory, shared again, but you have access to an actual file with it. And obviously you could move around it in my space now, showing you, that's a little bit trickier, but I can show you like this. So the different features like loading also containers, like Docker containers, so that you can have not just JavaScript executable, but any kind of code. And the really, let's say, novel part for that week had been the loading of the book. So that's the actual book from the Future of Text 3, not the latest version. I think it was from 2 days ago or 3 days ago. But then I can switch to the latest version whenever it's published, and then you can start to grab and explore it this way.
Fabienne, could you please zoom in on a page just so we can see what a page looks like in VR, just for the future records? I just want to highlight that it's actually as bad as it's easy to think.
So let me see if I can grab it. It's absolutely worse through all those different uploading and compression and whatnot. On my screen, it is something else. Let me recalibrate. It's a funny sensation, by the way, because those pages, they are more or less at the location of my screen. So it's as if I was taking the pages from my physical screen.
Oh my goodness, we have the best quote of the day right there. That's really interesting. I think that
so if I that should be pages. Just so this is not a bug. This is to see in a wireframe, so that I can see there are some meshes or some part of the environment that are too demanding, and I want to hide away. But it's also a fun view for that space, for any space really. So yeah, this way I can also show you. So the quality, I'm very close to it, but I can read it without a problem. And then if I type, so do you see the augmented reality part on my screen? I try not to move too much. So if I pinch on those numbers, oops, I can go back. I can also move the virtual keyboard wherever I want. So I can type just those numbers. And then if I do enter, then that's page 68 with the ability to go to the next page. So you can see page number there. And if I execute that code there, here I'm going to load page 69, etc., etc. Again, it's those functions are not necessarily specific. I mean, it's for this book in a linear format, but you can also think about graph exploration. You load to WebDAV a wiki or whatever, where you structure information and then go to the next node, open the nodes. Yeah, that's up to you.
Yeah, fantastic, Fabienne. We do have some more VR experiences we've done. Brandel has built a ton. They're all in the book with links that are live for as long as they're live, which is, of course, a general digital issue.
May I ask Fabienne a question? I was thinking and I wrote this into the chat, but preparing text, exporting text easily for in-world experience. We're doing this with the Uncle Buddy's Phantom Funhouse, trying to get everything 3D modeled. And it's hard to get that text modeled in a way, you know, for experiencing, you know, even online in a desktop environment. So it's going to be even more challenging to get it prepared for in-world in a VR environment. So what do you recommend? Because you've got, I mean, literally you've got blocks of text, right? It's not paper, it's blocks. So how will we be able to easily take a book, for example, and put it in world that is going to bypass all of that hard work we do in Maya and Blender and all the other technologies we use?
Be careful
Yeah,
what you
but,
say. Be careful what you say. Go on.
One thing that I did not show, I don't know how I could show it, but yeah, it depends what you want to do with that book. Like, what are the affordances you expect? Here, what I showed were images converted from the PDF, because the page is, let's say, A4 letter. It makes it manipulable, like you move them easily. It's not, let's say, a single string of letters. It could very well be, but I imagine that would not be necessarily very interesting. So it really depends on the affordance you want to have in there. The goal here was to have a little bit of both. So one thing I did not show was being able to parse that text and then see if there is code in it. And if you have code in it, then you load that code and you make it executable in that environment. But that's not just the affordance you would want. It depends on the kind of books you have. Also, maybe the book embed 3D models or have, yeah, so it's really up to the kind of content you want in terms of quality of text for rendering and all this. So I'm relying, everything is on the web. I'm relying on Troika, and I started to tinker with fonts today, but as most people in the group know, I make things that barely work. They don't necessarily look good. They don't necessarily work the next day. So in terms of anything that has to be either efficient or beautiful or reliable, I should not answer any of this kind of requirement. Works at all. Troika with a 3GS, I have good results with this. Works pretty well. So that's what I use. I don't know if I would recommend it, but that's what I'm using.
Basically,
I'd like to try to answer that as well, Dini.
Yeah. Sorry, Brandel. Yeah, please go ahead.
So as well as being an enthusiast and a fan generally of text, I'm also on the World Wide Web Consortium working group for the immersive web. One of the reasons why I brought the concept of text to this group, which is, sorry, the concept of virtual reality to this group, obviously they're well versed with text, is that we do have a standard, as Fabien is using, called WebXR. That's where I met him. And it's a system where web browsers, Chrome, Firefox, those kinds of things, have the ability to create a virtual reality environment based on what stuff you send them. Web browsers are what we see most of the internet on, and much of our computing is done through browsers, either directly or indirectly through apps these days. So, you know, apps like Twitter and Facebook are web browsers, as well as the Chrome and Safari that folks use on their devices as well. So the good news is that that the thing that we use to consume most of our text is the thing that also does virtual reality, will have the ability to do virtual reality in the future. The bad news is that the two don't really touch each other in terms of the presentation of virtual reality content, as you've sort of noted. A lot of people are having to build those things in Maya, Blender, that kind of thing. My hope, both in terms of my aspirations for the future, but also my professional goal, is to make sure that immersive web, WebXR, has the ability to consume text directly, has the ability for people to be able to make web pages that have the ability to very quickly become sort of spatial and 3D. I've done a couple of experiments. They're the ones listed in the book that actually have the ability to lift Wikipedia pages directly without any conversion on any other applications, to be able to then view those not just as a page within a headset that's possible through the generic this two-dimensional browser within virtual reality headsets like the Quest, but to convert those things into objects that have the ability to be intrinsically three-dimensional. There are a couple of sort of underpinning technologies that I have to use myself. It's my hope that we can come up with standards that should mean that within the next few years, ideally, people have the ability to basically use the HTML and CSS languages that people have been using for the last 20-something years to produce text, to do so in a way that will then allow them to do that spatially, intrinsically in 3 dimensions. That future is not here yet, but it's my goal. And for anybody who wants to sort of jump the queue, leap ahead, then the technologies that Fabian mentioned, Troika, it is something called a signed distance field text font generator, and it's doing something very similar to what I built for the Wikipedia system. There are systems out there. It is necessary to hand roll them. It is preferable to use something that is explicitly for text rather than to use something like Maya or Blender for constructing those things. But if you're interested in trying to get to it early before the standards are worked out, then I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, big points there. First of all, I think that very, very soon it will be VR first. I think that our offices will be VR, AR 100% very, very soon. And we will just in the same way that I can do a lot on my tiny little watch, we will think of the laptop screen in a similar way. We will still, we will use laptops for the next 100 years, I'm sure. It has a very specific thing about it. But it also comes down to what we mean by space, Dini, because a VR room is not one thing. And I think that's really something we've started to feel over the year. And what I mean by that is the most useful work that I get done so far is the background is literally just whatever I'm in. It can be a fake room, or it can be passed through, or whatever it is. But my work objects, they don't really relate to the room. Just like if you open up a book and look at the layout of a printed book, no one's going to say, how does that relate to the wall behind you? Right? And I know that is, of course, obvious, but I'm saying it because once you're in a fully digital environment, it kind of does in a way. So we have to make decisions on what spaces we're referring to. So there will absolutely be interesting things that happened over the year, at least as that new for me that I've noticed is plane detection, so that the system knows what a thing is more and more. So that means that, for instance, you can define the wall in front of you at home, or Dini, in your case, maybe the wall behind you there. That is your virtual and physical bookcase. So when you open up, let's say, one of our magical books, and of course, it won't all be about magical books, but for the sake of argument, you have a magical book, it opens up, all the references now populate what you have said as a shelf. So the reason I'm giving these examples is I don't think we're in every instance going to need to do XY coordinates for every single thing. I think they will be relative to the things what they are. So if you have said that another wall is for photographs from a book, you display them up on the wall, you do a layout, that layout will be for that wall. So if you now go to a coffee shop or an office or somewhere else, if you don't have that kind of assigned space, I can imagine almost an animation of those pictures flittering about saying, where the hell are we supposed to go? So it won't be a one-off space. And I think this is an example of what we have to experience in order to get to the next step of what to do. In the beginning of our Future Text Lab, it was really jumping in and doing everything completely different. And now we're almost back to, reading a plain book in VR. I mean, Adam Wern, who is not here today, he comes in and out, genius Swedish guy, very bizarre. He has some ideas for reading that are really off the wall. We need to support that. But more than anything, I think we need to build and try and build and try. And next year, before I give the mic over to Fabian, so to speak, can we at least try to have this meeting, even if next year isn't all about VR, can we try to have this meeting with headsets on? Even if we don't necessarily see each other, that sound could be Zoom, but we can look at our knowledge objects together. Fabian.
Yeah, so I'm going to briefly share my screen back, but just to show the 5 different kind of text I used. So let me know if you can see the screen again.
Not yet. There it is. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So the first, let's say, type of text that I'm using or I'll show it here in the code, is like this, a text, and then it has a value, let's say container. So that looks like HTML-ish. So it's not a 3D model. It's easy to understand, inspect, modify. If I change this, my potato is going to look hopefully like potato, or read rather like potato. So that's one way. There was also the submit thing during the event. And I put a bit of sound there, but yeah, you have the potato there. So that's as, let's say, direct as this. Same also if I type on the screen here, you saw all the eyes, and they are now there, grabbable or manipulable in here. Another way is images. So like the Future of Tech Symposium, and then I converted a poster to a PNG, but there is text in it. Another way, but as Brendan warned it, it's still experimental, layers where there were kind of augmented reality kind of shortcuts to show high quality, but not in 3D, let's say, anymore, not really in space anymore. And finally, on the last point about wikis and Wikipedia and whatnot, is loading from another source, like I said with WebDAV. So that's directly from my wiki. So that's a wiki page, not necessarily a beautiful one, but I can still edit it like so, and it's going to change it here, being usable, portable as JSON, and then it can be loaded in the environment. The point is, none of them are as a source a 3D model. They become 3D model at different stages in different ways, but that's again depending on what affordances you would want. Here it's code. So for example, I would expect to have syntax highlighting. Here it's text. So I would not, but I would eventually expect other like bolding or so it's entirely depending on the usage for it, and that being exploratory. Like I don't really know also myself how. Is it just going to be short code snippet like this, or grouping them and becoming gigantic? So there are a myriad of ways to do it, but I would argue it's still as is, even though it's experimental today, it's still quite usable. That being said, once I have organized my stuff, I'm also reading on this on a Remarkable or on printed paper. That's also why I mentioned saving back to the wiki or through WebDAV. Those are intermediary steps. It's not necessarily the end goal is not to stay stuck in the headset. It's like getting there to do more, not that, yeah, staying in there and yeah.
That was really great. That made it quite clear, Fabian. Mark is coming. I just wanted to add that if it's readable by the environment, in a consistent manner, it's good, right? Which is why HTML has been useful for you, Dr. Anderson.
I'm glad I waited, because in fact, it's really good to have sort of, I think, to say what I'm about to say, actually having seen Fabian's demo, because as ever, I really enjoyed it. And another part of me is thinking, I mean, not perhaps this room of people, but for most people, it is both fascinating and sort of beyond their comprehension to make. And what prompted me to put my hand up earlier was a question Brunel had asked me the other day. It's about an app on made for Oculus, which I won't name because the point is not about that that app per se. But the thing was, well, you know, can it organize things in the space? And I was asking on the Megas sort of Discord channel, and I was immediately struck by how quickly it went to somebody sort of saying, right, so you want to do a complex SQL query? And I'm thinking, no, I just want the red things and the blue things to be movable apart. Really simple affordances, partly because most of my work is knowledge exploration. You know, I very much want to work in uncluttered spaces, and I don't want AI or machine learning or something to trample all over the very gentle exploratory work I'm doing. Because what you're trying to do is to surface information and patterns. And the moment you just say, well, you know, everything that's, you know, X is more than 3 needs to go over there, is absolutely what you don't need. It's more about saying these things are not those things. These should be close, those should be far away. Very, very simple affordances. And what I found really interesting in the discussion, everyone was saying 2 things. One is that they all wanted to do something far more complicated and hard-edged. And the other was, of course, well, what you really need to do is, followed by the words just, basically build it all yourself and then bring it in. I'm thinking, I don't think you really understand. And perhaps that's unfair because, you know, juxtaposed to what Fabian's just shown us, you know, that's a lot of hard work, and that's sort of doing stuff that in a way is the state of the art. And what I'm talking about clearly is, in a sense, a generation in sort of development terms behind that. Because the point where the sort of affordances he's showing and doing things like this to be able to get at things in the space and the manipulation that Brandon's talking about aren't quite there for someone who isn't basically coding it themselves. But I said that to me, that's the allure of VR, you know, a massive screen, you know, basically doing on screen what otherwise you have to do in here. Because closest I get to at the moment is working on infinite maps in tools like Tinderbox, which sort of hypertextual text analysis tools. But you know, it's 2-dimensional, and sometimes you need more space, not because you need another physical dimension, but you just need more space. And the other thing is, normally most of us are working within the physical confines of a screen. So it's either too small to read to see everything there, or it's big enough to read and you can't see the whole picture. And the wonderful provocation of a sort of VR space is, well, you can have all that, because we do that in our mind's eye quite naturally. And so the affordances that we need to begin to develop are the ability to sort of, you know, collapse and expand things to move. You know, whether the data moves or we move is another interesting thing. Maybe I want to teleport, because actually what I want is I now want to stand on the other side of my little sort of universe of information. So I'm sitting on my enthusiasm for the moment, because I know that the things that I really want to do are some way off. But that's what I find so really interesting to see in the work that Brandon's done and Fabian have done, because I can see hinted in that the things that I'm talking about. And I'm extremely conscious that it's a while off, because I mean, although I talk about metadata and I have the thing, my sort of relationship to metadata is less as someone producing sort of data structures. I mean, I'm more like Mr. Tuttle. I've basically been an information emergency plumber for many years. So it's actually the sort of realization that if you didn't put a bit of information on it, you may not be able to find it. So that's in a sense where I come to metadata from. And that this again is pertinent because, as sort of Fred rather said at the outset, you know, in order to have these things, they've got to be constructed. They all have to have enough information to even build the structures. And I'll just jump onto one side point before I hand back to the room, and that is, I was thinking when I think it was Fred speaking just now about, you know, different rooms. Another way I think of those is different view specs, because in a sense it may be the same information underlying it. Say for sake of argument, the book, but in one room, one view, I may be looking at say a subsection of the book, or I might be looking in another room. I might be looking at another strand through the book that I've somehow extracted and visualized. And in moving between the rooms, we're just getting back to Doug's view specs. I mean, I know it's a term that sadly has not survived, which is a shame, because I don't think, I may be wrong. This is sort of a room where someone will probably correct me, say, no, it's alive and living, and it's called something else. And if that's great, and I wish it were the case, but this idea of having multiple views on the same underlying data is something that, oddly, not necessarily those here, but many I think have lost sight of in the years since the early sort of hypertext work. Anyway, I'll leave those thoughts for what they are. Right.
Thanks, Mark. Fabian?
Yeah, two quick things. In terms of the apparent complexity of it, or the difficulty to understand, that's mostly me being unable to present properly because I'm still discovering the thing. So as I present, I'm like, well, how do I show it? What do I show? What does it mean? What does it open? One thing I shared recently with Brendel and a few others is I gave a workshop to kids last Saturday for 20 kids, about 10 to 11 years old. And they got it. So that was, I mean, they had a good time. What did they actually understand is something else, but the point is they did have a good time, and they were able to manipulate. They were able to execute code. They were not just the coder, but they were able to see text that once interacted with in a specific way was either moved, and that was just like moving it around, or then does something. And they had quite a bit of fun. Again, it doesn't mean like they understood what it meant or what it opens up. But yeah, some kids at least both had fun and were able to interact with this kind of environment. And with like in 25 minutes, so it's not like a long introduction or anything of the sort. It was pretty much like, hey, put the headset on and try to pinch letters or move things around. So in terms of discovering, onboarding, or being able to play with the thing, it's not necessarily that complicated. It should be much easier. So I have another workshop on Saturday again, not tomorrow, but next week. Of course, if you have idea or suggestion, please let me know. One interesting discovery or realization was that initially they said, oh, I wanted a roller coaster with a murdering clown and this kind of stuff. Or I thought they would like dinosaurs and exciting things. And I just gave them text. I just gave them whatever you saw. And even in a boring, let's say, library from the 60s room. And that was enough because they had some agency, they had a sense of doing something and discovering something new, and nobody usually grab text in midair and leaves it there and it does something. So that was enough. There was no need for something, I don't want to say childish, but that I would have projected that kids would have wanted instead. So yeah, that was the pretty positive aspect.
Yeah, brilliant. Brendel.
Yeah, based on some of the characterizations that people have made about the spaces and having more space, I feel like it's really valuable for us to take stock of and reappraise the kind of information spaces that we reside in ourselves right now in order to be able to think about what those opportunities are. So right now, we all are by definition on computers talking to each other. Those are incredible things. They have very high color depth, very high refresh rate, 60, 120 hertz. But they also take up, unless you're really staring right up into the screen, a relatively small angular field of view. You can get more pixels, but rarely do you move beyond, say, I think this thing is probably taking up 20 degrees of field of view. I have information elsewhere. It's not in the photo here, but I have a picture of my wife's Inktober. It's a poster. I've got a bunch of books on my desktop, although there's a lot of other junk as well. So I have Bob's Mapping Hypertext book and Lewis Mumford's Technics and Civilization. These are also pieces of information. They're also displays of information. They are much cheaper comparatively than my MacBook in terms of their ability to be reproduced. I could buy more in a way that I probably won't buy another MacBook. but they have incredibly low latency, high latency in terms of the refresh rate. This doesn't refresh, but we don't think of them as doing the same job necessarily as the computer screens. Another really important thing about this is that it is manipulable enough and cheap enough for me to not consider what I'm doing with it, not consider the fact that I'm able to actually move it up to my face, move it around in a way that, again, I will not do with my MacBook. For the most part, I pull it up to my face and really stare at it. There are some technical reasons why that's not going to be practical to do in virtual reality for the foreseeable future, to do with something called the convergence accommodation conflict. We basically need to invent a new category of optics in order to be able to do that. And thankfully, Meta is pouring money into it. Another thing that we sometimes do, but don't always, is that we can manipulate books in other more destructive and creative ways. So this was a thick book, so I actually cut it in half, so that I could deal with the halves in reasonable enough order and be able to kind of sleep, read it in bed without the risk of breaking my nose if I fell asleep with it. But the important thing to do within the context of understanding what reading in virtual reality is and will be is to realize that there are benefits. Or the other thing about what happens on your computer screen is that because it's currently emulating a two-dimensional surface, it's less off the wall to realize that none of it is obeying the laws of physics. You don't have to worry about sticking things on. You don't have to worry about the relative weight of those things. Once you get into virtual reality and you have the ability to put a sticky note here in space or here, and there are some psychological reasons why it's not necessarily the best idea to do that all of the time, but it's possible to be able to position those things in free space. Computer screens, computers more generally, do not need to obey the laws of physics. You don't need to have things. You don't need to have those objects be stuck up in the same way that my Inktober poster is stuck on the wall. So there are phenomenal opportunities and advantages. Likewise, with Mumford or with mapping hypertext, I don't have the ability to actually change the size of it in the way that I do on a computer screen or in a sort of natively digital environment. I have the ability to take it to a copy shop and use sort of a digital intermediary to then re-render effectively. Remember the refresh rate sort of concept, the artifact at a higher sort of scale, and in fact, in some environments, people actually do that in order to be able to have it sort of reimagined and reframed as an object of significance. But all of those things are trivially and literally at our fingertips when we have a digital environment. And I think it's an important thing to invite everybody into imagining is when you have, the ability to do reading for your own benefit, manipulating these spaces, environments, texts, in that level, with that level of fluency, what does it look like? What do you do? And I think that's something that we all need to play with for the next while.
I saw that Matthias put in a link to a IKEA book, which we'll look at, but I have a question. Now that we have half an hour left, how do you want to read an sorry, before I ask the question, we've talked about different kinds of text, but not really. We could go further, like poetry is probably quite different from academic text and interaction and so on. But just to be concrete for fun, how would you want to read and interact with FOT4, the Future of Text Book 4 next year? Are we going to do nothing, or are we going to overthink and pretend we're 50 years in the future? Or are we going to think of what realistically can be done with now, but that we would actually find beneficial? Over. Matthias first.
Thank you for using the word interaction. How do we want to interact with the book? I suspect that we are all of us, that the economy as such, or the technical economy as such, is blown away by the hype of virtual reality, which is a sphere, it's a dome, it's high pixels, it's almost 3D games and lots of fun. but we tend to forget the interaction, and that's how to point at something, how to select something, how to say from here to there, to capture something, to put something from here to there, to use gestures, to shrug with shoulders, to raise an eyebrow. So all this stuff is kind of neglected or not on the focus of research right now. So what I like to see between now and the real bright future is that interaction schemes and patterns are being developed, tested and developed, and that we get to a kind of consistency how to interact with these virtual spaces on text. And right now it's every vendor who invents something new, and you have a steep learning curve, and you're enthused because now you can operate these goggles and handles, but you're totally lost once you move from one system to the other. So I'm urging for kind of valid, sound, robust, reliable, consistent interaction paradigms for what's coming in the future, not to leave it to the nerds and engineers.
I'm not sure if I agree with you right there, because that's going to happen next year to a large degree. You know, Apple, they always do it. They come out with some interaction that people like, very limiting, but it gets most done. So that, yes, now we're living through Cambrian explosion. Let's have it a little bit longer, because of course you are right, no question. But we have to make sure that we've had enough experimentation of interactions to get to that point. And again, you're right, because it's also putting people off. We've got to do what you're saying. I'm just wary of doing it too quickly with too many systems. Let's be a bit more crazy for a while, maybe. All right, Fabian.
So for me, that's shocking to hear this, because I focus just on interactions. So that's definitely the most interesting aspect. It's not like having a screen or even a volume, it's how you're going to interact with it, with the content in it, with your content outside of it. So I'm convinced, like, you build your reality, even forgetting the headset, through interactions. You interact with the world, it pushes back. That's how you build an understanding of reality and virtual reality. So I'm pretty convinced that interaction is at the center of it. And for this, how I would want to read the next version is, we had an example through the last discussion is, because each of us does read differently in and out of VR, that each of us would share at least one, ideally, code snippet or specifications of a tool that is precious to them. And if I say code snippet, because ideally the book itself would be a set of tools on reading better. If that's in VR, why not? It doesn't have to be. We discussed this last time about having a ruler or a bookmark or whatever, but being able to define small function that support reading, and then we can exchange with each other. So have a little small collection, not of content, but of documented content, like as the different tools I have, let's say Post-it notes or pens or whatnot. This kind of things would be not just the content of the book, but tool within the book to better read that book, and in an inclusive, intellectually speaking fashion, in the sense that that's, let's say, I would share my way with a small tool on how I read. It doesn't have to be useful to anybody else, but hopefully it might. And same way, it's not a formative way, but a proposal.
Peter.
Okay, I hope we'll have mixed mode control so that I could raise my hands like this and say, open the Future of Text Volume 3, and then have the system recognize my voice and res the book into the position of my hands, and then be able to move it up off to the side, let go of that book, res another book. Again, using hand gestures, put the two books next to each other, but the mixture of hand gestures and spoken dialogue to drive the interaction. So I could say, jump to Fabian's section. And then in the physical copy, well, in the virtual copy of the book would just automatically advance to the start of Fabian's section in the text. So again, a mix of a domain-specific language for operating the model and hand gestures to indicate where within the spatial area I want the activity to occur.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of assuming that our future headset in 5 or 7 years is going to, in addition to having a full tracking of gestures and recognition of positions of objects, the ability to have a simple API to be able to get the text that's being spoken in its presence and then feed that off to arbitrary code. So it won't necessarily be Apple's code running the parser, but rather I can write my own parser and just simply grab what's currently been said off of a simple API.
But this kind of stuff, please start shaking your head if you violently agree, guys, could be done literally today. You know, and the only thing stopping us is money and imagination, right? Because some of those are big things, but I really, you know, what we are doing now is trying to get a transcript. We're a lot less people than expected, and that's absolutely fine. It's a better dialogue. But if there's something after this you think about over the weekend that you want to have written into the book, you know, I'm just desperately worried about, sorry, Matthias, too quick homogeneity in VR. You know, Mark Anderson refers to too quick formalization. You know, we just don't damn know. Like Brandel talks about hands all the time. Great. Most of the time it is a real revelation in VR, but sometimes you need a device. Right? So it's so easy to get excited over something, and Brandel knows so much about VR. We just have to have the opportunity for people to just try different shit. Right? So what you just said there, Peter, if you want to write it as a piece, I'll put it in the 1-sentence thoughts section we have in the book. And Richard, please obviously feel free to do the same if you want to. And Matthias, if you want to argue with us, I mean, like Fabian and me, we're literally fighting the book because he's written horrible, incentive, vile stuff against the case against books and things like that. You know, so I have to hold my own. But anyway, yeah. What's this? Onboarding demos and so on. Yeah, cool.
I don't want to argue with you. It's a point taken and acknowledged. Maybe from a different angle. What I like to see and remind all of us, we are designing for humans, and humans have certain abilities. And if we go 360 degrees in a circle and have an infinite space, this is probably overwhelming because no one is used to this space already. Yes, we can go crazy. We can go Matrix. We can go Hollywood 3.0 or whatever. But we still design for human beings. And if we want to augment what humans are, then we don't have to forget what's in the center of this new sphere. That's another twist to my point. The other one, totally agreed. Standards too early is limiting us. That's not my point.
You said something really beautiful there. You said the human is at the center of this sphere, which captures it literally and philosophically and morality-wise and lots of things. So I think one thing that in this group, what I've seen doing is flailing around the whole sphere, coming to that realization and then overly being focused on the knowledge object in front of us. At least I have been. It's like, okay, forget about the backgrounds, too many damn pixels. What shape can we make our knowledge here? So I think you're completely right. And what I hope will happen over time is that our brains will develop into the entire sphere. But that will take years, because that will be literally growing up in an environment that isn't like anything. You know, like today we have digital natives and all of that nonsense. I mean, I remember starting with Liquid and stuff, being a relatively old guy, and a lot of people saying, what is this, what is that, not caring about digital. And then suddenly Facebook, people tag pictures. Like, do you realize you are uploading to the internet and adding metadata to share your knowledge in a community? It's like, that's why I'm saying the term VR won't survive. For people doing this, they're not going to care what we call it. It'll be their headset, and I can do this and that. And it's our responsibility as people who care to try to figure out what the this and that is. Mark?
Yeah, I'm going to take a run at your question from a slightly different angle. So I don't know if Randall and Fabian want to sort of reply on this just immediate thread, because I'm quite happy to wait. Would that or not? Okay, right.
Yeah, sorry, I will.
No, do please. Yeah.
That'll be quick. Also, about, let's say, getting used to the sphere or how we're going to organize it. I said it before, but I'll say it again. Like I showed the demo without any even expectation of usefulness, but some kind of grounding to say it exists, rather than just quote unquote having philosophical discussion. And also because from an egoistic perspective, I don't think waiting for the medium to be good is interesting. It's like playing with it right now, even if it's to see the boundaries, that's valuable. Even if I literally threw away all the headset I have in the trash and all the code I've written, I absolutely don't mind, because I think that's by exploring through that sphere or environment or whatever actual shape it has, that's the actually interesting part. And also because if I don't, then again, and as Freud reports also often, it means I'm relying on somebody's own exploration and their conclusion of it, which might be very good for them, but completely awful for me. So the way we're going to evolve through that sphere, whatever shape it has, or that volume, that's the most interesting part for me. And it cannot be delegated, it cannot be weighted. And yes, it's very frustrating because the hardware and the software has limits, but it always will be. So there is literally no point in waiting for better hardware. It will come, but then what are you going to learn in between? And again, even if the hardware doesn't come tomorrow, all the new ideas it provided or helped me think and see through the world, that also was the valuable part. Even there is literally no VR tomorrow, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yes, and thank you, Fabian, for being one of the biggest contributors for the book on all kinds of opinions. You know, that will be what people can break through. So thanks for that. Okay, Mark.
Yeah. So, you know, how would I like to look at the next book? Given that the next book is arguably the sum of all 4 volumes, and we haven't written the next bit, one of the things I really want to be able to do is for the book to just be simply a physically based view spec on well, I haven't got a word for what it is, but in others, let's move beyond the book, because to a certain extent, that's one of the things holding us back. Now, that doesn't mean that we may not choose that one of the ways we might not, for instance, want to read the content of the book is sort of, in a sense, manifested in the form of a visual page, because that's culturally and sort of educationally something we're used to. But I think something we ran into at the end of this year, because quite late on towards finishing up for the book, we started having discussions about, well, how we might, you know, extract elements from it. And one of the issues we faced actually is it transpires we don't really have the metadata. So you have kindly shown in the present book right at the end, you know, something you've done in author in terms of some automatic extraction of sort of entities and things from it. But it does show up the limitations. For instance, there's something to show up automatically. It literally normally has to appear as a text term, because software isn't that clever in understanding the semantics of our speech and writing. So that says to me, maybe we need to do some retrospective work in terms of actually looking at some of the stranding of stuff we've got at the moment. And I mention that because I think that may help inform us of what we're missing in terms of, again, and I don't want to prematurely formalize it, but in a sense of the metadata structures. So to do what we want, what do we not have? It's not enough to imagine it at this point. To move to the next step, I think we need to say, okay, right, we need to have this strand of information. You know, in order to display things along this axis, we need to actually know what that axis is, and we need to be able to place things along it. Yeah, so I think that's something for us to aspire to for next year.
Yeah, no, that's great, Mark. But you know, when it comes to the actual book, you know, here's volume 1, here's volume 2. They both have, you know, visual meta, but the second one has it done automatically, and all the web servers in the world can go down. I'll still have it.
No, I
Right.
think we're talking at sort of slight cross purposes. Now, I have to agree with what you say. And I mean, I'm surrounded by a room full of books. I'm the last person who's going to say I won't consume it in this form. But what I really meant was, I don't know. I just want to see all the things on typography, or I just want to. It's this stranding, because we sort of talk about it quite often. But I'm well aware that the distance between the imagination and actually manifesting it, even with the code there, is another part that hasn't been done. And we did hit this at the end of this year. I mean, it's nobody's fault, but I mean, it's taking that realization and running with it, because having that extra information enables us to have additional and newly interesting view specs on the information that is the whole of the corpus of the books.
I'm going to arrest this a little bit, because we've kind of been going in the community on this quite a lot. Because I agree with the desire, no question. But like, for instance, here are these peoples, right? And when I defined them, if they hadn't said if they are an academic or an author or an artist, I don't actually feel comfortable labeling them. And I'm saying that as the most basic one, right? So in order to get metadata, you have to have someone who is an authority to a degree, or just have an opinion is fine. And this is why we talked about the whole idea of having like a book DJ or curator or whatever it might be. But a lot of the stuff about who people are, I've been even trying to do a timeline, just even to get people's birthdays or birth years has been a challenge, because a lot of people you don't want to embarrass. There's a lot of people who just don't give a monkeys. And then there are other people driving into the book and driving me quite literally insane with the miniature changes they want from their bibliography. So I agree with the sentiment, but we can't do anything with that metadata if we can't get that metadata, and it's such an intensely human problem.
But I wouldn't start with the people, because even just for instance from the privacy things, but there are subject matter is less less problematic in that regard.
Yeah, but
like David LeBeau certainly did some analysis on Volume 1 that we haven't circled back around to, and I think that might give some potentially low-hanging fruit.
Well, this is
and to break out of this problem about not wanting to make a judgment on things.
Right, but this is why the notion we've talked about a lot of different bindings. You know, like I want to be able to say maybe Mark Anderson's version of the book, you know, where he has chosen to define this or that or whatever, and then go to that stream. Right. That's kind of circling back on that. Brandel.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the sort of characterization of this moment as the Cambrian explosion. And one of the things to drag the metaphor along limpingly is that the Cambrian explosion was 500 million years ago. A lot of cool stuff happened, arguably, but it was still another 200 million years until the first mammal appeared. And it could be claimed that mammals are pretty important to the current sort of context. And I would characterize the current moment in virtual reality as Cambrian in that sense, not only from its profusion of stuff, but also because of its sore lack of even the first instance, iteration, what have you, of the what might be useful for us for informational purposes. As I said, I've been involved, or it may have been said, I've been involved in virtual reality for a while now, and in web virtual reality. Fabian and I met in 2016 talking about this stuff. And the sort of the standards bodies, committees, people interested in this have been working on it for many years now, but without nearly enough emphasis, nearly enough interest in information, in processing and text. And so we don't. So while the first actual some of the first computer displays were actually augmented reality displays. Sort of Damocles was an AR display for a cube. The state of understanding what the benefits are for information are incredibly sparse on the ground. And one of my reasons for trying to bring virtual reality to a group of people and an audience and like this is to say it's critical that we seriously think about what our needs are within information processing, within text and reading, in order to make sure that the very first mammalian species emerges within this Cambrian explosion, to skip forward those 200 million years, in order to say we have to see it. We have to see what happens here when we take the needs and the opportunities of text and reading and writing seriously enough to include them, because everybody has been looking at video games. They've been looking at immersive video, all of these things which are either, gee whiz, or containing real utility, but don't have the opportunity for real rich creation and expression and mutual sense making. Certainly, VR chat and other systems are places where people have made a phenomenal amount of meaning for each other within, but it's been utterly ephemeral, and it hasn't had a number of the characteristics that we would typically require of text in order to make sure that it passes those thresholds of value and importance, legibility, searchability, those kinds of things. So yeah, we are earlier than you probably think, yes, in terms of the function of text within this place. And it's important to realize just how early that can be. There's a really wonderful video from the Computer History Museum of Larry Tesler, sadly passed away this year, but he was one of the original Macintosh people. He was actually at Xerox PARC as well. And he talks about the fact that once upon a time, they didn't know what a scroll bar was. They called it an elevator. They thought that maybe they would have a whole bunch of sort of spiky bricolage stuff around the outside of a window in order to identify the reasonable places by which you could resize it. Ultimately, people decided that you actually need to be able to grab it and drag it from anywhere. So those concepts, as bedrock as they are now in a two-dimensional context, were incredibly difficult to work with and incredibly difficult to kind of make sense of. And if you look back even into I would say scroll bars really settled down in the early 90s. But prior to that, they were all over the place, the up, down arrows, down arrows. We don't have even the basic sort of grounding of what a scroll bar or its equivalent is within virtual reality right now. And it behooves us as people who care about and know about text to think about what kinds of sort of motifs and themes are necessary for us to be able to pursue in order to do that.
Okay, and my trusty assistant, just at the right moment, hands me this book, which is just quite amusing considering what you were talking about. It's really fascinating. So the first mammals, just to be very literal, were little, right? They were tiny little mousy creatures, obviously, right? None of them flew jet planes. And I'm saying that because in my little massively long speech in the beginning, I said that the first thing, if I was running Apple or Google or Meta or any of these VR companies, the first thing I would do is get a team to make it that if you have a laptop open in front of you, put your headset on, you will see your damn screen. It is so mundane, but I really think that would open the market amazingly much. And if you had the next step to be able to pull on the top of the screen to make it bigger in this way or that way, wow, you've changed what computing is. Boom, right? It would. I honestly believe that. And the reason I'm saying it is, Brandel, you need to work in VR too. Not all the time, but you need to be there. Quest 1, not good enough, right? I don't work there very often, but I try to use this guy, and I use just Author. I just use a bigger monitor. What I do, I fake it. I make the Author screen massive, make the text tiny, make a small column, because I can't make a fake virtual screen. And I know, obviously, Brandel, we've discussed this. In software, I should be able to make a virtual screen, but I can't. It has to be something the Mac thinks is an actual screen. That's the current limitation. But there is so much that this little mammal can do with the little stuff that we have now, which can be literally useful if we as a community pull a few pieces together. Like if I can easily go in and out of Fabian's environment and things, we just have to start there. We just have to make it useful. And then we can, have a couple of million years of evolution happen in a few months. Don't forget, think like GPT-3. There's a new article in our book today, which is by Chris Gutteridge. He got a poem, a sonnet, a Shakespearean sonnet about Doug Engelbart in there that he generated this morning, plus actual code that he generated this morning. So what's happening with AI is so insanely rapid. And, you know, there is the discussion of Doug Engelbart being at the MIT campus and talking to Marvin Minsky. And Marvin Minsky saying, you know, we're going to make computers smart. We're going to be able to make them reason and think. And Doug said, that's great. What are you going to do for people? Doug told me that particular discussion didn't happen, but the sentiment is entirely correct. VR, as we've all agreed, has the potential to help us think. And if we now just let the AI thing just take off, which it will, without us actually doing a few useful things, we're so screwed. You know, I use my headset so much less than I should. So this is not coming from any kind of a high horse. This is coming from a horse of saying, you know, can we get a saddle together, everyone? Can we do a few ordinary things? And what I hope, Brandel, especially with your amazing advanced work that is so interactive and so deep, that when we do the really basic mundane stuff, some of it Adam has done, and he's not here, and I'll punch him in the face when I see him. You know, if we can combine that stuff and this stuff, it'll be amazing. Because very often in discussions, it floats around somewhere here. I want freedom. I want things everywhere. I want the... I would like it if this community could define and build, not necessarily build, but define the specification of a reading tool and a word processor in VR. It's not that obvious. But in our last few minutes here, considering we do have to publish the book at some point, considering the year will end at some point, and considering that I desperately want people to be able to cite this year for their ideas and not next year because of things. Oh yeah, and I'm looking at Matthias's comment there. What are the things that we really want to write down in the sand for the future? You know, let's say that someone in literally 54 years, considering it's 54 years since Doug's demo today, in another 54 years when we're all either dead or too old to answer the phone, if there is a phone, what do we want them to have from this chat today? What did we dream VR could do for us? Maybe we should look at it that way. What's the effect we want it to have on us? Come on, guys. And unfortunately, after Dini left, we are all guys, but that's another thing to work on. Yes, from Portsmouth.
Well, I'll start. Just so someone will come and say something more sensible afterwards. Well, one thought to me is effectively to free text from the page, and this sort of speaks to moving beyond our last generation of technology, because we often talk about text as basically being a symbolic representation of our thought. So maybe now we're in a position to actually get closer to the thinking behind it and the ideas encapsulated, because it doesn't require to be physically manifested in a fixed medium. And unsurprisingly, at the moment, a lot of things we're doing, despite our best attempts, are actually sort of remanifesting elements of our print technology. And that doesn't surprise me at all. I don't think it's a bad thing for it. But I suppose my provocation is, yes, well, you know, we're about the future of text as much as we are VR. Well, let's let text move ahead from the print age into the VR age.
Yeah, so just to reinforce this, it's indeed, I think, if we love something, and I know all of us love books, we have to be honest enough to admit the limitations. We have to be honest enough about not just VR, but paper books, also the things that We cherish, let's say, computational notebooks, whatever those are, to be able to do better. So yeah, I think not necessarily letting go of the book, but really being honest enough to criticize it, and then not just have philosophical discussion, but once it's been criticized, attempt to do something better.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly,
I would say
that the first writing was not flat. Let's remember that. Because Fabien, you did the whole thing of saying we're reclaiming space. Remember, the very first notations humanity ever did in cave walls was not flat. It was drawing a buffalo on the shape of a buffalo. So when you have the torch go past, it would move. So, you know, we have a lot to go back to, that kind of experience. Sorry, Brandil, please continue.
No, very, very in line with where I'm going to go, which is, as well as being an enthusiast and hopefully reasonably competent practitioner in the VR space, I'm also a firebrand, a zealot for the concept of extended mind and embodied cognition. And briefly, that is the view that we don't simply think. We exist in a world, and we think basically through momentum, both figurative and literal, meaning that by doing things, we focus our actions and our thoughts on what's going on. One of the most sort of damaging things that happened over the 20th century, to add to my shopping list, was the sort of the Taylorist view that because we didn't know anything, we couldn't know anything about what was going on inside the mind, that it didn't matter, and that we could also sort of abstract away a lot of the sort of the particular sort of operating characteristics of what it was that the mind does. At that same time as well, because I think, in large part, that because computing was, at the outset of computing, we had ENIAC, UNIVAC, all of these enormous computers that you had to sort of set running, and they were exercises in absolute and total abstraction. You had numbers representing things as we do in today, but we have enough cycles to burn, so to speak, to be able to kind of represent things as colors, represent things as motions, and, you know, in the future at some point, hopefully being able to represent them as other sensations as well. And so we are coming to the opportunities that are afforded to computers and to people using computers from a particularly bad piece of recent history in terms of our understanding of what it is that the human mind, the human body, the human sort of society needs out of computing in order to do information processing. If I was to sort of reach in 54 years into the future, I would say, look back to now, obviously, if you've forgotten already, but try to look back further and much further into what information has been across the totality of human history when it has been met with and responded to very different sort of characteristics of cognitive modeling and the sort of the trends and tendencies of the way that information has been represented over the eras. Because, like I said, the laws of physics don't apply. The opportunities for representation about various things is wide open. And it would be a tragedy for us to simply recapitulate all of the limitations that we currently have. As I've talked about in some of my videos, word processing as it currently stands is to do with recapitulation of the printed page. Xerox PARC literally is a photocopier company. They built some things to be able to represent things as though they were documents. It's only just, I think, this year, Google Docs have said, we're going to make it pageless. And it's like, this is a revolution. Amazing. Congratulations. We have the opportunity to go so much further if we recognize the totality, like in the most general terms, what it is that we as human agents need, and really think about how we can make sure that we tailor computers and computing to those artifacts, to those characteristics, rather than merely the ones that we understand or believe computers as they currently stand to be the best at. If we think about what humans are as holistically, as generously as possible, what it is that we need for computing, then hopefully we can make it better for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Beautiful. Matthias.
Oh, that's hard. I totally agree. I can't do better than you. And I don't try anyway. But text is kind of magic time capsules. You can talk to people who are no longer around, or vice versa. They talk to people that are not existing yet. But essentially, it's a communication between people asynchronously. And I would like to see a kind of, well, Sieb des Eratosthenes in German, so the sieve of the Aristotele, to find the prime numbers within the whole corpus of text. So not everything at once, but some clever heuristics, not saying artificial intelligence right now, but some clever collective heuristics to really find the nuggets inside these corpus of clever ideas of humankind. That would be cool to interact with people that are not in this Zoom conference, not now, not in the past, not in the future, but get access to the wisdom of the past and the future. Amen.
Yeah, absolutely. Fabian, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I will share my screen for literally a second. So I'm listening to everyone, but I'm also coding and testing at the same time. What I shared before, meaning that now I know that I can put those pages of the future of text, but I also can load my wiki, which is a graph, and I can open pages from the children of those wiki. So this is a practical illustration to basically say thank you, Frode, for organizing this, for herding us, and for everyone here and people watching, because I don't know if I'm thinking better than before, but I'm at least having a ton of fun. I do believe, though, that it is valuable, so I'm very happy to share. But yeah, was to say thank you for this community.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. And I think also for our future descendants, that may be the key message, because if we're going to invent, we need to feel safe, first of all. And we need to be able to disagree. You know, there are many ways to do that. So no matter what happens with technology, the human ways that humans are allowed to deal with each other will shape what human potential will be as much as any physical or technical attribute. So when I very pretentiously in my presentation earlier today talked about, do we have the will to do this? I wasn't just trying to be ridiculous, and I wasn't trying to be too high and mighty, but the thing is, if we manage carefully to grow this community, you know, not everybody being on every meeting, but by saying, to discuss how to improve how we think and communicate through text and associated things, maybe somebody cleverer than us, or just randomly, will get that inspiration that will make something wonderful happen. Maybe it will be us. But, you know, as long as we keep plugging, in a real sense, who cares, right? All we care about is trying to do our best. And I want to say to the far distant future, we really did try. You know, we're living in challenging times, but then, you know, if you look back at just 2019, we thought it was challenging then. And what's happening to our planet since then is just insane. So in 54 years, I think our primary message to you is, thank God you survived and you can see this or read this. I look forward to seeing all of you in the future at various events, and thank you very much for today. If there's anything you want to sneak into the book, you have the weekend, and then we will do the thing of getting it out. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye.
Take care. Thanks so much.
Bye.